Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. It's a real privilege to be here to speak with Ngaio and about Ngaio. So I'm so relieved actually that you are here and chose me over the America's Cup. That's all I can say right from the start. Thank you so much for being here and not cheering on a foreign vessel. So I would like to begin. Dame Ngaio Marsh, crime queen, travel writer, honoured writer at Same But Different 2021. We wanted to zoom her in for our session today, but she's dead. Her death wasn't sudden, though she actually created many sudden deaths in her career as a crime writer, nor is it new news. Dame Ngaio died, you'll be relieved to know, of natural causes in 1982. And if she hadn't passed away then, she would have died of shock and horror anyway when she saw her name listed on the Same But Different program for today as an honoured queer writer. This would have been for her a public outing, an experience for her not unlike waking up sweating and troubled from your worst and most persistent nightmare and realising it was true, that you'd been found out. But we forgive you, Ngaio. Actually, I should mention here, she's sponsored by Benson and Hedges. So we forgive you, Ngaio, that is, most of us do. We forgive you because our worlds are a millennium and a paradigm shift apart from yours. Ngaio died 4 years before the 1986 homosexual law reform began queering the straight consciousness. So how bad was it back in the day? So this is the New Zealand Listener, 11th of January 1971, announcing a documentary television show entitled The Homosexuals, 1971. Now this is what they said about it. They range across all occupations, all races, all classes. Some dress conservatively, others flamboyantly. Some are married, others single. Some lead full social lives and others keep to themselves. Of all minority groups, homosexuals are probably the most ubiquitous and least understood. Now, it's coming into the open. Still reading. A man can speak frankly about homosexuals and even admit he knows one or two. But with social and legal attitudes as they are, few homosexuals feel inclined to announce their inclination publicly. Now, many of us in this room will remember back to 1971 when we were forming our lives and shaping ourselves into the people that we became. So that's the background. So for all those homosexuals who were reluctant to announce themselves publicly, how can you blame them? Because in places like North Carolina, a man caught making consensual love with another man in private could be imprisoned for as long as an armed bank robber, for twice as long as second-degree murder, and 730 times as long as the public drunk. So times were difficult. So Ngaio, we understand your reticence, your desire for privacy, your locked down personal life, your bubble of protection. Well, most of us do. So what I want to address today, or talk about today, and consider two questions. Why honoured writer, and why queer? Why queer writer? So I want to then finish with just a little bit of personal nightmare, and that is the nightmare of being publicly pilloried for even entertaining the idea that Ngaio might be queer. So first, why honoured writer? Now, to set the scene, and we could move to those great images. To set the scene, I want to take you back briefly to the beginning decades of the 20th century, to the golden age of crime detective fiction writing, golden age. During this period, Ngaio Marsh was a crime queen, and here are three of the other crime queens looking very glamorous. She was one of four great crime writing queens during this period that included Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers, and Marjorie Allingham, all British writers, all women from the middle class, from middle class backgrounds, upper middle class backgrounds. So this was a rare and extraordinary time with some remarkable women writers. So in 1942, writer and critic Nicholas Blake described the detective as the fairy godmother of the 20th century. So fairy godmother of the 20th century, folk myth, and the detective in this context played a magical role. It was a favourite bedtime story. The detective resonated with readers to create a worldwide audience hungry for murder. You're right. Faced with the flux of a rapidly changing world, readers in the 1920s, 30s and 40s sought intellectual escape in problem plots, where sanitised death teased the minds of anyone from a housewife to a High Court judge. It was a democratic form. It appealed to almost everyone. What the detective novel offered was fictional stability. Everyone with a stake in the restoration of traditional order was a potential reader. So if you can move it on, just to give you... So here we have the four queens of crime. So, with this massive new burgeoning market of people that just wanted to return normality after some kind of dramatic puncturing of normality. So everyone with a stake in the restoration of the traditional order was a potential reader. The detective novel portrayed a world of prescriptive hierarchies and reassuring rituals. It assumed a reasoned universe based on polarities or polarised right and wrong, black and white. It assumed also that right could be restored when wrong things happened, where anarchy occasionally erupted, but normality was almost always restored in a complete sense. In some sense, it was always restored. So by the 1950s and 60s, so going on to that period after the Second World War, so in the period after the Second World War, people knew this couldn't be true. In a way, they lost their faith. The red-faced colonel. Now, okay, here it is. This is the cosy genre, okay, the cosy. So this is a kind of intimate genre where there's only a few characters. It's usually in a very intensely small geographical setting. Often, the typical one was in the manor house, so it was almost like a theatre with a very narrow stage. A few characters, often quite cliched. And here's, it was almost always a butler involved because it was often aspirational. It was a story about people, that in a way, about lives that people wanted to have, whatever end of the scale they were on, except they didn't want to be the murderer or the murdered victim or the victim. So So what happened in the 1960s and 50s and 60s after the war? There was a sense that this world could not exist. The red-faced colonel, the desiccated vicar, the dilettante, the debutante, the writer, the artist, the foreigner, all the cosy cast of characters, of stock characters, that frequented the pages of these detective fiction stories could not survive the realities of 2 wars and a depression. Genocide, the nuclear bomb, the wearing away of empire, the class system, the wearing away of the class system, the manor house, the last vestiges of the Edwardian era meant it was kind of the kiss of death. The whole foundation of golden age detective fiction crumbled in the face of chaos, complexity, multiple truths, cultural mixing and diversity, and random acts of violence without any retribution, without any punishment, without any judgment. So, in a way, I'm going to reel you back again to the 20s and 30s and 40s when this kind of amazing group of women were writing and dominating the scene. Previous to them, there had been Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, Conan Doyle with Sherlock Holmes, so we had a history, but they were all short stories, actually mostly short stories, not very many novels at all that had Wilkie Collins wrote The Moonstone, but the whole genre took off, it got legs and ran, and women were the ones that gave it that kind of zest and that energy, and in some ways created the structure for it to move out, for it to become an intense and very successful genre. So you could describe it in a way as a loss of innocence, or perhaps a rupturing of our ignorance of the human potential for depravity. But as I said, let's go back to those decades, those amazing golden decades, where these women dominated. And as I said, 3 of them were kind of middle-class English women. And we had one New Zealander that slipped there, and she really slipped in there because she was infatuated by another woman that she sort of had to chase overseas, and that was her stage and that was her opportunity. So more about that later. So she was the 4th and the last to join this team in a way, and they knew each other and they knew each other's writing and they referred to each other in their books. So it was a very close kind of relationship that these people had, with a little dash of jealousy probably thrown in every now and again. So Ngaio Marsh was the 4th, the last to join the crime quartet, with A Man Lay Dead. And in actual fact, afterwards, she was kind of embarrassed about it, and you can sort of see why. But, you know, the thing is, everything is written in its time, and I think these are well worth reading in the context of their time. So it was written in London at the end of 1931 on a kind of whim. I think she enjoyed reading them, and it was published. She had to rush back to New Zealand. Her mother was sick. She was dying of liver cancer. So Ngaio was called back, in her 30s by this stage, called back home to her mother who was dying, to be with her, and was with her before she died. And she basically threw the book in the post and sent it to an agent. And she was going through the writing thank you letters for people that had sent flowers and acknowledged her mother's passing. And her father was sitting there together, and bingo, a letter from the publisher, from her agent, to say that the book was being published. So quite a remarkable thing, and quite an amazing feat for a New Zealander to break into a scene which already had some iconic writers in it, very successful. They were taking a risk on Ngaio, and they had to send everything to New Zealand to be checked. So the proofs, the galley proofs came to New Zealand. Everything happened in that long distance between the UK and New Zealand in those days. So it was written, as I said, the end of 1931, kind of chucked in the post, just the dream everyone has, every writer, I think, that's ever been born dreams that they could chuck something in the post and get the letter that says that it's going to be published just like that. It must have felt effortless to her, really. And in it, she introduced her detective, Roderick Allen, who I actually do not have a photograph of, partly because actually they weren't illustrated, but of course we could actually show you some of the characters of the television programs that actually played those parts. So Ngaio, and I think this is why why. This is the answer, really, to why we're here today to honour Ngaio Marsh. Ngaio Marsh would write a phenomenal 32 novels over a period of 50 years. It doesn't sound so good that way, but if you think about it, I can brush it up without any trouble. So about 60 to 80,000 words, probably more like the 80,000 words per book, or it certainly felt like that when I was reading all 32 of them. And she would have written about, 2.5 million words. So that's not bad for a lifetime's work. And she finished her last book just a couple of weeks before she died, just a few weeks before she died, in February 1982. So I think it's a remarkable career. Now she was also a theatre director, so she directed theatre. Amateur theatre and professional theatre in New Zealand, but particularly with the drama group, the University Drama Group in Christchurch. She did that and put on major productions, and so she wrote an average, including her trips away, an average of 1.5 novels, detective novels, per year, and that included the research she had to do, which I know Anne Perry gets her brother to do, and also the reading and correcting of the proof sheets, which it's mind-boggling. So as well as this, she did other writing. She did travel writing. She wrote for The Listener. She wrote for magazines and also newspapers. And she wrote a book called New Zealand with some of her illustrations in it for the centenary. So she was constantly writing, and she also rewrote a spot of Shakespeare. She edited Shakespeare so that the people in Christchurch could catch the last tram home. So she cut out all the bits that she didn't think were very important. She wanted that kind of detective feeling to it. So anything that was she regarded as might have stopped people from getting into that tram on time, she took out. So she supervised and edited Shakespeare to suit the young players in Christchurch. She was, in fact, a kind of Renaissance machine. She was a painter. I don't have her paintings with me, but that's how I got interested in Ngaio Marsh. And I thought, thank God I can move out of oil paintings into murder. It just seemed like a great transition. And so she was kind of a Renaissance woman in the true sense of the word, talented, confident, exciting. And so this is actually the Detection Club, and I'm going to give you. So it's an image by Russell Clark, and it's a cartoon that was often put. She did a lot of radio broadcasts, and there's Ngaio looking down at these kind of slightly eccentric characters who are actually members of the Detection Club. And they met at Grosvenor House in London. A very, very pretentious kind of plutty sort of evening they would have together. They would have a meeting, and then they would have actually a meal, a lovely meal in Grosvenor House, and then they would adjourn to a sort of banquet, a special room they had, and Dorothy Sayers stood up at the podium one time. They would come in, and there would be someone wielding a knife, and that was a writer, kind of crazy. Someone with a skull on a cushion that lit up. And someone with a file, and they would come in. You can actually see she actually wrote about the Detection Club, wrote about it so she could then do the radio broadcast. And so we've got Dorothy Sayers, E.C. Bentley, Edgar Wallace, and I know Agatha Christie wasn't there that night, but she often was. She was a member. The thing is that Ngaio could not be a member because she lived in New Zealand, and you had to go regularly, so she could never be a member, but she was a guest often there. And at one point in the proceedings of this one that was being advertised, Dorothy Sayers pulled out a 6-shooter and shot at the ceiling, literally a bullet. So it was wild times, and detective fiction was dynamic and crazy and eccentric, and actually I think they believed what they did. To put Ngaio Marsh's achievements in perspective, here she is. Okay, wait for it. This is Ngaio Marsh with William Collins, and I think it might be Alan Lane, but it was certainly Collins and Penguin that published. This is 1949. There she stands there. 1 million books by Ngaio Marsh. 1 million books. Like, I know what $1 million looks like. It looks like a house in Waterview. But I don't know. I can't imagine what 1 million books must look like. But in those days, in the when detective fiction was kind of sort of in America, a good-sized print run was actually 2,500 copies. A big one in the early days of crime detective fiction was 10,000 copies. So this is 1 million books, 10 titles, and 1 million books. Look, no wonder she looks happy there. I would be ecstatic. This is amazing, because this is our Ngaio Marsh. We don't really hear that much about her. Really, I think that's the shame of it all. But we'll go there later. There's more reasons than I can go into for that here. But it is an amazing thing that Penguin and Collins could feel that they could publish this many books and look at it as an investment, not publishing suicide, because they believed that there was a body of readers out there, or a body anyway, in one or two of the books at least, a body of readers out there that would buy these books. So there's only 3 other well-known writers who have that distinction. George Bernard Shaw, I think maybe you've heard of him, H.G. Wells, and Agatha Christie. So, that's why we honour Ngaio Marsh today. So for many fascinating reasons, crime detective fiction had a huge sway over a vast number of readers in the first half of the 20th century. The reasons for the decline in the appeal of this particular type of, I'm saying cosy crime, very much a formula, had certain characteristics which in some ways did not survive the era. The idea of murdering someone, of course, is universal, and you can carry on reinventing that any way you like. So it's interesting why it lost its sway as a genre. But this is amazing. I'll stop stuttering because I can't believe it. Agatha Christie has sold 4 billion books. Maybe some of those were the million that they did, but and she's actually better published than God. if you're talking about the Christian one. So, in actual fact, there's quite a few murders in the Bible as well, but they weren't as, I think if God had adopted more of a cosy kind of theme, he came, whatever. Anyway, but now I'm going to go to my second question, which is why queer? Why queer? Now, look, why queer? Oh, I'll explain that to the best of my abilities as we go on. But and maybe you can make up your own mind. But I have to say that surely no one in this world would be better at hiding the clues than Ngaio Marsh. At dangling red herrings that go nowhere, at covering her tracks, and at keeping her identity hidden. We have, in actual fact, each one of the crime queens had a secret story. Dorothy Sayers had a son born that no one knew about. And he was brought up by her cousin, and paid to bring him up, and he found out as a mature, well and truly into his 40s, I think 50s, when it was revealed to him that Dorothy Sayers was actually his mother. A huge secret. Sad. Agatha Christie also, I don't know whether you remember the film, Agatha, the film, when when a marriage broke up and she sort of disappeared. And for 9 days they couldn't find her, and Dorothy Sayers was kind of introduced to crime writing after being in the public crowds that were going out to look and try and find Agatha Christie, because it was the big story. She went missing, 9 days, vanished, and they found her kind of confused in a spa, but still alive. So each... I probably could dig something up about Marjorie Allingham, but I couldn't when I was doing this, so I'll have to dig a bit. You'll have to come to the second part of this next year. So if we look at Ngaio Marsh's life forensically, maybe even do an autopsy. Actually, we'll talk about the autopsy later, but there will be one. If we look at her life forensically, we can detect rainbow patterns, and there's definitely the odour of fish. So let's look at Ngaio Marsh's birth. Right. Okay. So it is well documented that William Marsh, Ngaio's father, took a full 4 years to finally register his daughter's birth in 1899. Now, 4 years, that's a long time to not be able to find the registry office. So there's kind of, I would say, that this has been kind of portrayed or presented as an oversight. It's been explained by Henry's absent-mindedness. Henry Marsh. By Henry's absent-mindedness. But there is, I would say, more than a whiff of fish here, because Ngaio's parents were kind of clinically obsessed with their only child. I believe there's a little chance that registration of her birth would have been overlooked. Maybe there's an issue here that made that registration difficult. So we'll leave you hanging on that one. And think about it. It might come up in question time. If we've got some, yeah, we will. Okay, so it's also a well-documented fact that Ngaio had a number of undisclosed and mysterious operations in her teens and early 20s that, according to her cousin, meant that she could never have children. So again, a mystery with no real explanation. This is, I wanted to pop this up because this is one of this Agatha Christie. Can you tell? The great glasses. You've got to have, if you're going to do crime writing, you've got to have a great pair of glasses. Or a hat. So there they are. It's interesting that Ngaio Marsh created Roderick Allen, her detective, and balanced Roderick Allen with his wife, Agatha Troy. So, and she claimed that it wasn't about Agatha Christie, but and actually Agatha Troy was much more like Ngaio herself. But you know, it was they sort of played these great games between them and respected each other's body of work, I think. Okay, so there we are. This is her great pride and joy. This is her Poe Award. So it was actually awarded to her for a short story, I think. But anyway, she got the Poe Award. There she is. It's sitting there with it in her hand, looking self-satisfied, as she might well do. And she wrote in a chair, sitting there often with I think she wrote in green ink. So there she is, just sitting there in her home, which was on the Kashmir Hills, and you can go and visit it. So if you would like to have a look around and immerse yourself in a little bit of crime and murder in Christchurch, and even if you're very, very lucky, you might even be able to try on her dresses, because there is someone in this room who was offered an opportunity to do just that. So if you look longingly, and you look like you might be able to fit them, so you might, that's an opportunity that might come your way. So what else do we know about Ngaio Marsh that might kind of slightly queer her story? Ngaio Marsh described herself as a tomboy. She described herself in the ilk of Huckleberry Finn. She made rollies out of pine needles and probably just about killed herself. She smoked from a young age. Preteen and adolescent years were very Huckleberry Finnish, not at all feminine. She smoked, she fished, she floated on rafts. She played almost exclusively with boys. She hunted with her father, and she could shoot a rifle as well as any man. She identified with her father, undoubtedly. So he was her key kind of role model. There she is. You can see her, but there are lots of other ones. I would love to show you the one with the dog, because they had a hunting dog, and them sitting, she and her father sitting together with a rifle kind of between them on their laps, sort of preparing to go out to hunt. So she had a different upbringing. She was almost, in a way, she was Henry's son as well as his daughter, and that's in a way what you get in her crime writing as well. So she had a crush on a well-known lesbian in the theatre when she was planning to be a painter. I'm just making sure I haven't not running over time too much. She planned to be a painter. She was a pretty bad painter. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say that. That's a bit mean. She wasn't very exciting. She was very, very traditional, extremely traditional, and a little dry. There are one or two really nice pieces, but that's all there is. And she invested a whole lot of energy in that idea that she would be a painter. And then she got involved in the theatre in Christchurch, and that was a different kind of world, and that was much more fluid in the sense of bohemian, of being able to be in that world amongst people that she felt comfortable with. So when she toured with an acting troupe, she travelled around New Zealand, and reportedly, and it's in my book, go and have a look, because you've got to pick out these clues as you go through it. So I'm only giving you some direction. I'm not telling you which pages they're on. So she had with a well-known lesbian Māori woman in the theatre that travelled and acted in the theatre. This is in her 20s, in her early 20s. Then she had an unrequited relationship with a young soldier friend who was very conveniently killed in World War I, which is also a wee bit, very sad, but also a little bit of a red herring, because that was constantly dragged out as the reason why she fell so totally in love with this young man, that she, there was nothing that could quite replace him. Well, there was, in fact, and this is my next point. So she didn't get married, obviously because this guy was killed. So she really took to the theatre in Christchurch and was involved in the theatre, and in that context she met Nellie and Tahu Rhodes. And Nellie and Tahu Rhodes were aristocrats, really, certainly English aristocrats living in New Zealand, owned property, but really were expatriate English aristocracy. And as soon as the money ran out in New Zealand, which it did quickly because they spent lavishly and lived an incredibly over-the-top kind of lifestyle without much support, they left New Zealand in about 1926-27. So by that stage, Ngaio had developed such a passion for Nellie Rhodes that she followed her, basically. She followed, and so she was the third member of a menage a trois that was based actually in London, just out of London, in a large manor house that they rented, the Rhodes family, when they returned to England. And she worked with Nellie Rhodes, and she began a business called Touch and Go, which is probably a good sort of summary of her life. So she had this kind of business with Nellie Rhodes, and really had a sort of a kind of love relationship with her. While Tahu, who was notorious for being a wee bit of a philanderer, carried on his own activities. So suited them both. Suited everybody, actually. So rumours did circulate, because they do, that Ngaio and Tahu had a fling. But I'm feeling that that's just more red herrings. But that's how it always goes. There's always an explanation. She was elegant, often chic, but also very, very tall, with shoes the length of small snow skis and very large hands. She had a voice lower than Helen Clark on a course of testosterone. These characteristics may be incidental, even irrelevant, but every bit of evidence helps create a picture. And this, for goodness sake, is how she dressed. Ngaio Marsh was this is a bit theatrical rather than, I would say, exactly cross-dressing, but we'll get there. So Ngaio Marsh was an unashamed cross-dresser. Yeah, I think that does it. This is the group meeting in the mid-1930s, and you can see her looking decidedly cross. Cross-dressed. She's the one with the tie. Probably the only man there, but no. You can see. Have a look at the women there. Cardis and skirts. And there's Ngaio with her trousers and her tie. So the point is that it's often described as the way that women of very high fashion and sophisticated women of the day dressed that way. They cross-dressed. That was kind of a way to sort of express your smoking, and cross-dressing was a way of expressing your independence in the world. So that, that's undoubtedly, there's, a good argument for that. But, there is chic, but definitely always in a masculinized, and I know that, not too long after the war, this is actually between the two wars, this is probably 1940s, 50s, probably 40s actually, but this is in Monton, and she's playing the roulette, playing roulette in the gambling houses, and she talks about the women, the third sex, women that cross-dressed, that were at the roulette tables, and she won. They lost phenomenal amounts. She and Nellie went together, and they lost the family fortune, and then won a little bit, and then lost it again, and finally Ngaio left with an outfit. So she was pretty lucky. So, but you can see that this was a persona. Cross-dressing was kind of a part of her essential self, and I think it was more of a signature than it was just a style of dress for sophistication. Okay, so this is my next point, is the intimates of her circle were gay men and women. All her leading acting proteges, with the exception, I believe, of Sam Neill, were homosexual. Were not all of the very high achieving ones and most recognisable. Elric Hooper, looking absolutely strained and devastated. Jonathan Elsom, looking like Shakespeare, realising probably that Ngaio Marsh has just cut out half of his play. So we have, these were her proteges, these were the actors at Canterbury University, these were the people that she felt at home with this company. They were people she felt safe with, and she felt secure, and they were really, in effect, in some sense, her children. They, particularly the ones that she really mentored, they lived with her frequently, and they were very silent often about her. To me, because I talked to all of them, and in fact am related to one of them. The one with Shakespeare. So that's my cousin, Jonathan Elsom. And I talked to him quite a bit. But anyway, if we could move on to just the next one. This is Gerald Lassels. He's a lawyer. And so they're working together. He directed with her, co-directed. He produced and assisted her. And none of these people were really happy to talk about her as a lesbian. But I think they would be happy to talk about her queerness. And maybe that's a good place to begin the discussion, and you could go further if you perhaps could. So she was homosocial, Ngaio Marsh. Her private life involved a very close and discreet group of mostly lesbian women, single women, lesbian women, who were her absolute intimates. So that was her world. That was her world of peers, close peers. These were younger proteges, probably more in the generation of her, of the children she might have had if she. And so I want to move on to. Okay, so Sylvia Fox. I love that last name. So short, but says so much. So Sylvia Fox, her life partner and soulmate really was Sylvia Fox. They actually knew each other from primary school days, and it was Sylvia, I think, who in some ways made the awkward Ngaio feel okay. Ngaio bought the house behind her house on the Kashmir Hills so Sylvia could live close by. That's interesting. There was a hole in the hedge that they ducked through to see each other. Ngaio died first, and then Sylvia died later. and they're buried in the Ackland family cemetery in Beale Forest together. Sylvia's headstone is beside Ngaio's in the graveyard of the Holy Innocents. I love that. I'm sure they weren't. They were the closest of friends, companions, and neighbours in life, and will be for eternity. So that's the end of the slides. If we could just... Yeah, there is one more. Yep. The slides of other people and other doings. Okay, yeah, so it was a difficult thing to write. This first book came out in New Zealand in 2008, and then it was released in the UK. And I got a very hard time from some critics about... One gave me a very hard time about that I had actually said too much and closed the door on Ngaio to her sexuality too much, whereas I felt that I offered a fairly open reading. And so there is so much sensitivity around people's reputations, but icons who the straight world feels are intrinsically damaged when they are allowed, when what is queer about them is allowed to play through and to be acknowledged. So I got a difficult time with the lesbian issue particularly, almost only, and then also the gatekeepers in New Zealand, because once you get an iconic figure, you get people whose careers are touched or built on or played through that life, and they become the gatekeepers and the controllers of the narrative. So, you know, you inevitably strike those people as you're writing. So I got, I felt I was pilloried, really, in a way, over what I did on Ngaio Marsh, but also Frances Hodgkins. Really just opening the question, is too much damage for a lot of straight commentators, or even, I would like to say, some of the most really damaging curators of these iconic lives are actually homosexual or gay or lesbian themselves, because they are responding to their own internalised homophobia. So, it hasn't been an easy, and I was so. It's kind of sad when you have to be so thrilled, but I got pilloried in New Zealand. And when it came out in the UK, where there was no big investment in one version of her life, and no gatekeepers that particularly felt like they had a wagon to push, it was chosen as the Christmas pick by the independent newspaper. And it was one behind Stieg Larsson's Woman with a Dragon tattoo and a head of P.D. James. So I thought, stick it. But isn't it sad that you have to go away to be seen? Because we have that structured blind sight, that blind spot, and it's been very hard, I think, to run an academic career that has opened Pandora's box for on some lives with just a question, with just the questions, nothing more than the forensic evidence that suggests something more complex and more layered. So That's good. Is there any questions? Is there a last slide? Oh, is it clean? Oh, okay. I was just a bit worried. I thought, I didn't know there was. Okay, rightio. So I was lucky. My book was actually part of 2008. Was part of or 2009 in the UK. They have to keep Ngaio in print, so you can always get a Ngaio Marsh book because. Once once she's out of print, then they lose the copyright. So it then shifts. So they don't. So that's the issue with that. So I was lucky to my book to kind of coincide with a series of books. They brought out all her 32 books in some anthologies really of her crime writing. So that was a huge thrill. Yeah. So.
I think we have time for a question. I'll just hold the mic. Can we... Is that possible? Is that on? Hello?
I hope no one's going to ask me the one thing I didn't look up last night.
I hope it's not what you didn't look up. Given the 4 years it took to register Ngaio's birth
Yes.
and the operations that occurred later on,
Yes.
are you surmising that she may have been intersex?
There is possibly some issue there. There is possibly an issue there. Now, in this room, there's the daughter of her doctor, her specialist, sitting in the front row, my cousin. So I know she had, I think she got cancer, uterine cancer. But that doesn't end the story of I think that there could have been some complexities there around that issue, and it's in the book, and it's there. But I felt at the time that there was, so there was an explanation and quite a good one. But if I'm looking to present a reading, then I think that's a bit odd. And I don't think that Henry was that hopeless. Sorry. So, yes, I would think there was something not quite right. Yeah. I mean, physically as well, structurally.
In terms of copyright, I'm just interested. If they do keep it in print, when does copyright run out?
It's 50 years. For a New Zealander, it's 50 years after the death. So it's still, so there's a really good reason to keep, producing and holding on to the copyright. Yeah, and then it can be mass produced in the domain by anybody. Yeah, basically, unless somehow they renew. That's why Mickey Mouse and Disney had some issues, because Mickey Mouse got old. He was, and I think that might be 70. It's 70 years in the UK and 50 here. No worries. Yes.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Joanne. So, 2008, 13 years ago.
Yes.
Here you are. Thank you for being here and presenting this. But it's only 13 years ago, and I was wondering about that gatekeeping.
I've got a funny story to tell you. No, that's right. No, gatekeeping is very disturbing, and you run into it all the time, it also diminishes your reputation, because that's how you're seen. Oh, she's just a lesbian. Oh, she's one of those kind of writers. She interprets things because she's got a coloured film that is rainbow streaked, but they don't do that for anyone else. But gatekeeping is occasionally you get a chance to get your own back, and the guy that was quite damaging to my book. Really, I'm sure it affected the sales in New Zealand. He put out a book on Ngaio with more of a sort of teaching text kind of thing, and he was very, very proudly told me, that he had done it, and by some kind of Rutledge, sort of more of a academic kind of thing. And I wrote back, and I thought, I wrote back to him, I said, thanks for letting me know. Can you give me the publisher's name and I'll review it? So, I didn't hear anything more from him. It was quite strange. I can't work out quite why he didn't reply, but I never heard anything. But yeah, the gatekeeping is horrendous because it's done in subtle, and in a small place like New Zealand, those subtle 1,000 cuts, small cuts, damaging cuts that take away, the job you had, or the opportunities you were given, or the awards you should have had, continue right through your life. And I think it's pernicious in New Zealand because the goldfish bowl is so small, and there's one or two piranha in there, and they are they're vicious, and in a way, after a while, they're invested in a reading that they won't shift on, and you want to do anything different to that, and it's just too hard. But you keep doing it, because I'll just say one thing. I loved the point where you go out and you write the books that you want to read. Well, I did the same. I wrote the stories and the lives of people that I wanted to know about, and I think that urge doesn't leave you, no matter how dangerous it is. It doesn't leave you, because in a way it's the reason you get up in the morning. And I'm sorry about getting emotional about the last part of that story, because but in a way it is so hard, and you carry it really intensely, and there is no easy way. Because you're just never given a soft option. And I watch other people with their soft option, and I keep saying to Susan, and Sue says to me, don't be negative. It's not helpful. Sorry. Yeah. Am I over?
I think that's...
Is it? Have we had a whole hour? Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much. I just hope you don't regret not going to the America's Cup.
Can we have another round of applause for Jo? Jo, I so appreciate your way of telling stories that are able to kind of pick out the beauty and frivolity of people's lives and the kind of hilarious inconsistencies that happen, as well as the pain and hardness of that, and what happens with shame, and how we're affected by that. And it's just so, I think these sessions are so important to be able to bring back places to honour the stories that don't often get honoured, and to be able to hear about Ngaio Marsh's life and her impact globally, just a phenomenon, is just really, really important. And yeah, thank you.